Hello, and welcome to another one in our Clinical Research Basics series. This one is looking at the people that are involved in a clinical trial, so the different groups, the different individuals, and what their roles and responsibilities are. I hope you find it useful. So these are the people that we're going to be looking at: the sponsor, the investigator, the regulatory authority, the ethics committees, vendors, and participants. First of all, we'll look at the sponsor. So the sponsor can be a company, such as a pharmaceutical or a biotechnology company. They might be a non-commercial organisation, such as a hospital or a university, or they can, in some cases, be an individual. The sponsor has primary responsibility for the trial as a whole. So they design the trial, they fund the trial, and they manage all of the activities that need to happen in order for the trial to be conducted. There can be more than one sponsor, in which case the contract between the sponsors needs to be very watertight so that all of the responsibilities are clearly defined and allocated. Next, we'll look at the investigator. The investigator is usually a doctor, but they don't have to be. If they're not a doctor, then there must be one on the study team with responsibility to look after the welfare of the trial participants. So the investigator finds the participants to take part in the trial. They administer the product or the products, if it's a controlled study, to the participants. They collect all the data about whether the product is working and also what the potential side effects are. And they also report all of that information on to the sponsor. There are a couple of other things that the investigator is responsible for. So they have overall responsibility for the conduct of the trial at their site, including all of the staff at the site. And they're also responsible for the care of the participants at the site. Next, we're going to talk about the regulatory authority. The regulatory authority is usually a government body, so they're a legal organisation. There are some examples here of logos of some regulatory authorities. So we've got the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which is the American Regulatory Authority. We've got the European Medicines Agency, which covers Europe. And we have the MHRA, which is the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, which looks after the UK. So the regulatory authority provides legal approval for the clinical trial. So the clinical trial authorization or the IND, investigational new drug approval. And you can't conduct a clinical trial without this legal approval from the regulatory authority. They also develop the clinical trial legislation for that country or that region. And they also conduct inspections of clinical trials. The other body that provides approval for a clinical trial is the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee is an independent group of people who look at the trial from an ethical point of view. So they review and approve the trial for ethical issues related to whether it's ethical to conduct this clinical trial in this patient group. So their primary concern is the protection of the participants who are taking part in the trial. The constitution of the Ethics Committee is important to allow them to do that. So there are usually requirements around the number of members that have to be on the committee. There's usually a requirement for a mix of lay and expert members. And also there may be a need for specialist expertise for particular kinds of research. For example, if the clinical trial is taking place in children, then you might need access to paediatric expertise on the Ethics Committee. Next, we're going to look at vendors. Vendors are commercial organisations and they provide services to sponsors usually, but sometimes to investigators as well. Some examples of the services they might provide are audit capability, laboratories, monitoring of investigational sites, data management, or writing of reports or protocols. There are lots of different kinds of vendors, and there are full service vendors which will run a whole clinical trial, or there are specialist vendors that might just do one particular thing, like a central laboratory, for example. The sponsor or the investigator, as the case may be, delegates to the vendor tasks, duties, and functions through a contract. But it is important to be aware that even if they're delegating these things, the sponsor or the investigator is still responsible for everything that they delegate, and they need to maintain oversight of anything that they delegate to a vendor. The final group that we're going to look at is the subjects, and these are actually probably the most important people that are involved in a clinical trial. Historically, we've referred to these as subjects, but you will see more today that we are referring to them as participants. And the idea behind that is that they are participating with us in research rather than being subjected to it. So the participants are usually patients, but maybe healthy volunteers in certain situations, particularly in early research. With a new product, we might, if it's feasible, use healthy volunteers rather than patients. So they take the product and they attend the visits, or they may increasingly provide information remotely using a smartphone or some other kind of device. There are new requirements that have come in recently regarding participants in research. So we need to make sure that we are involving participants in the design of research so that they're involved in the design of the protocol and the clinical trial. And we also need to pay attention to diversity in a participant population and make sure that we have a good range of different types of people involved in our research. So that's the end of our video. I hope you found it helpful. If you need more training, then please do have a look at our GCP Regulations and Guidelines online course, and the link will be in the comments below. Thank you for watching.